He never meant to fall in love. Not there, not like that. It was supposed to be a quiet retirement in Cuba, little sun, some rum, and long walks by the sea. But fate doesn't care about plans, especially not when a man like Richard meets women like them. This isn't a story about a tourist romance. It's a story about loyalty, seduction, and the strange way desire finds you when you've stopped looking. 3 sisters, each with a secret. One man with too much past to forget, and an island that watched everything unfold. Hi, I'm Veronica. I've spent decades exploring the untold stories of passion, choice, and consequence. And tonight I'll guide you through one you won't forget. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. It helps me bring you even more hidden tales from around the world. Richard had never planned on Cuba. It came after everything else had failed: his marriage, his business, his belief that he could start over in America. At 61, he was tired, not bitter, just quietly worn down by years of trying. So when his friend offered him a small beachfront cottage in Varadero, he said yes without asking for the price. The island was hot, lazy, and alive. The people spoke with music in their words, and the sea never seemed to sleep. It wasn't long before the rhythm of the place began to heal him. Mornings with sweet coffee, afternoons with waves, evenings with old jazz records and Havana Club rum. It was slow, and for once, Richard didn't mind that. Then came the day he saw her. She was standing by a fruit stall near the Plaza de la Libertad. Green skirt, white blouse, hair like dark honey pulled into a high ponytail. She wasn't alone. 2 other women stood with her, all 3 of them laughing over something the vendor had said. They moved like they were dancing, even when standing still. And Richard, holding a plastic bag with half a papaya, couldn't move at all. Her name was Juliana. Her sisters were Camilla and Rocio. The 3 of them ran a small guest house by the coast, just 3 blocks from his own. They'd lived there all their lives. Their parents were gone. Their grandmother had raised them with hard rules and quiet wisdom, teaching them how to survive in a world that often ignored women who were both beautiful and poor. That first conversation was short. A hello? A joke about the heat. An awkward compliment Richard immediately regretted. But Juliana didn't flinch. She smiled with her eyes first, then with her mouth, and asked if he was American. He said yes. She said, "You look tired." He said, "I am." She said, "Then maybe you need to learn how to rest." He came by the guest house the next day. He said he was just curious. They said they were just cleaning. He brought mangoes. They made coffee. By the end of the hour, he wasn't sure if he was being hosted or tested. The sisters were nothing alike. Camilla was loud, quick-witted, always teasing. She wore dresses that clung to her and never apologized for her laugh. Rocio was softer, always reading, always listening. She watched Richard with calm eyes, like she saw things he didn't say. And Juliana, the middle sister, was the one who asked the most questions. Where he was from, why he came, what he wanted now. Richard answered carefully, not because he was hiding anything, but because something in their presence made him want to be precise. Weeks passed. He found himself timing his walks to catch glimpses of them. He pretended to forget groceries just to stop by their corner. They invited him for dinner one night. Fried plantains, rice, spiced pork, rum that burned sweet, laughter that filled the tiny kitchen like a song. He hadn't laughed like that in years. It was Juliana who stayed behind to help him walk home. It was her hand he held when he stumbled on the step. It was her fingers that lingered just a moment longer on his arm. And when she said goodnight, her voice was lower. Slower, closer. Richard went to bed that night with the fan spinning slowly above, thinking of nothing but her voice. And he never stopped going back. He told himself it was innocent, that it was just good company, that he was too old, too worn out to be anything more than a friend. But his heartbeat betrayed him each time Juliana brushed his shoulder or laughed at something he hadn't meant to be funny. One morning, Rocio brought over a basket of guava bread. "For the lonely man," she said with a smirk. But her eyes didn't smile. They searched his face like she was looking for cracks. Camilla invited him to a local dance night. He declined, but she insisted. "You don't have to dance," she said. "Just watch. That's what you're good at, right?" At the event, Richard stood in the corner, watching Camilla whirl across the floor like wind, watching Rocio hum to the beat, and then Juliana walked up to him with a look that said everything and nothing. She took his hand. They danced once. Slow, close, her body warm and sure against his. People watched. But no one said a word. Not yet. After that night, he started waking with purpose. He trimmed his beard, ironed his shirts, walked straighter. He felt years peel off him. Not because he was younger, but because something inside him had shifted. Desire had returned. And it scared him more than age ever did. Still, he knew better. He wasn't there to start over. He wasn't Cuban. He wasn't their future. But something about the sister Sech in their way made him feel like he was being offered a role in a story that hadn't yet been written. And he wanted to read every page. The whispers began at the market. Soft, almost affectionate at first. El americano. El viejo con las hermanas. Nobody said it to his face, but Richard felt its side glances, unfinished sentences, laughter that stopped too quickly. One morning, a young man selling fish gave him a crooked grin. "You're a lucky man," he said. 3 flowers and only 1 vase. Richard didn't reply. He just picked out a red snapper and paid too much. Back at the guest house, things were changing. Juliana had grown quiet. Not distant, but thoughtful. Camilla, once playful, had started calling him abuelo when others were around. Always laughing. Always just a joke. And Rocio. Rocio had started staying longer when she brought breakfast to his porch. She asked about his past, his regrets, what he dreamed about when he was young. She listened in a way that made him uncomfortable, in a way that made him feel naked. One night, after a long dinner, Juliana asked him why he hadn't kissed her yet. Her voice was low, steady. Richard hesitated, then said, "Because I don't know if you want me to." She smiled. "You've kissed me 100 times in your head. I want to know what it really feels like." So he did. And it was not gentle. It was not old. It was hungry. After that, they began meeting in secret. Early mornings before the sun rose. Late nights under mosquito nets. But the secrecy added weight. It made the small town feel smaller. It made the sisters feel further apart. Camilla stopped inviting him to dance. Rocio stopped bringing bread. One evening, Juliana didn't show up. Richard waited on the bench near the sea for over an hour. When he returned to his cottage, Camilla was waiting at the gate. She looked different. Her hair was pulled back. Her makeup was gone. She wore a simple white shirt, no earrings, no perfume. "She won't come," she said. "She's trying to protect you." Richard asked, "From what?" Camilla looked at him and said, "From us." She walked away before he could ask what that meant. The next morning, Rocio appeared at his door. She didn't knock. She walked in, sat on his couch, and placed a small photograph on his table. It was old. Black and white. 3 girls, barely teenagers, standing beside a tall man in military uniform. "That was our father," she said. "He was American too." Richard looked closer. The resemblance was faint but real. "He left," she continued. "Said he'd send for us. He never did. Our mother died waiting. Our abuela raised us to never trust men like him again." He asked why she was telling him this. "Because you are becoming him," she said. "And we don't want to hate you." The air felt thick. Richard didn't know what to say. He was not that man. He had stayed. He had cared. But in her eyes, he saw something that unsettled him. It wasn't anger. It was fear. Fear of wanting something she'd been told would hurt. Juliana came the next night. Her eyes were swollen and she spoke with effort. "We were never supposed to let this happen," she said. "We promised each other no man would come between us." Richard reached for her hand, but she stepped back. "I love you," she said, "but I love them more." And just like that, she was gone. The following days passed in silence. The sisters stopped coming by. Richard's porch, once filled with voices and footsteps, became quiet. The house across the street no longer lit up at night. No music, no laughter, just the sound of the waves, which now felt more like reminders than comfort. He tried writing letters, leaving fruit on their doorstep. Nothing changed, and every time he passed someone in the village, their eyes told him what they thought. That he had broken something sacred. That he had taken too much. One afternoon, he went to the cafe by the dock, the place Juliana had once pointed out as her favorite. Camilla was there, alone sipping coffee. He approached her carefully. "I miss her," he said. Camilla didn't look at him. "We all miss things." "She told me she loved me," Richard said. Camilla finally met his eyes. "And we loved each other too. Before you." He sat across from her, unsure what he was hoping to accomplish. Maybe forgiveness. Maybe just a chance to be understood. "We never had a father," Camilla said. "We had each other. And that was enough. Until you made her think she could have more. I didn't mean to take her from you. But you did." The words hit harder than he expected. He returned home that evening to find Rocio on his porch again. No bread this time. Just silence. You should leave, she said. I can't. You should, he asked. Would that make it easier? No, she whispered, but it might stop us from tearing each other apart. He looked at her, and for the first time she looked tired. Not angry, not wise, just tired. I thought I was healing here, he said. You were, she said, but maybe healing isn't always meant to last. And then she was gone too. Days turned into weeks. Richard stayed. He stopped trying to fix anything and simply remained. He didn't leave notes. He didn't bring gifts. He just existed, walking the same paths, sitting on the same bench by the sea, nodding at the same vendors who no longer smiled back. One evening, just as the sky turned gold, Juliana appeared at the beach. She sat beside him, her body close but still distant. I didn't think I'd see you again, he said. I didn't think I'd want to, she replied. They sat in silence. The waves came and went like breath. I never lied to you, Richard said. I know, she said. That's what made it worse. She looked older now. Not in her face, but in her eyes. The way people look after they've cried too many times to count. I was just starting to believe in something, she said. Then you reminded me what it feels like to lose it. He reached for her hand. This time she didn't pull away. Camilla had moved out, Juliana said. Gone to stay with a cousin inland. Rocio barely spoke anymore, not even to her. The house was too quiet, the walls too thin with memory. I didn't know I could break something without meaning to, Richard said. You didn't break it, she answered. You just showed us where the cracks already were. They walked back together, slowly, like people recovering from surgery. The next day, Rocio came to his door. She held a small box. Inside was a single photograph Juliana as a child holding a seashell up to her ear. She used to say it told her the future, Rocio said. I think she wants you to have it. Richard stared at the photo. It felt heavy, though it couldn't have weighed more than a few grams. I don't know how to fix this, he said. You can't, Rocio replied, but you can choose not to make it worse. He asked if she hated him. She shook her head. No, but I don't trust you either. And that's worse sometimes. Later that week, word came that Camilla had been seen in Santiago, singing in a club, living alone. Someone said she'd dyed her hair red. Juliana started coming by again. Not every day, not even often, but enough that the silence between them began to soften. They didn't talk about love. They didn't kiss. They just sat, watched the sea shed coffee, peeled oranges. One night she asked him, would you have stayed if I hadn't come back? He said yes. She didn't ask why. Then came the letter. It was in Rocio's handwriting, left under his door. I'm pregnant. 3 words. Nothing more. No name. No explanation. Just an earthquake. He read it over and over, each time feeling something new: shock, guilt, confusion, fear. He hadn't touched Rocio. Not the way he had Juliana. A brush of the hand, a look too long, but never more. Or had he? He couldn't remember a single mistake. But what if the mistake wasn't a moment but a pattern? He folded the letter, walked across the street, knocked. No one answered. The next morning the guest house was empty. Richard sat on his porch the rest of that day, waiting. For a knock, a scream, a lie, the truth. Anything, but nothing came. That evening, he returned to the cafe near the docks. The waitress, a young girl who had once complimented his Spanish, avoided his eyes. He sipped his coffee, bitter and lukewarm, and stared at the empty chair across from him. Juliana had left. Rocio too. There were no goodbyes, no explanations, only absence. Later that night, under a restless moon, he wandered toward the church at the hilltop. Not because he believed, but because it was the only place that felt big enough to hold his questions. He sat in the back pew, fingers clasped, eyes dry. What if I ruined them? He whispered. Not with cruelty, not with force, just with my presence. He thought of their laughter the first day he met them, of Juliana's smile, of Camilla's dancing feet, of Rocio's quiet strength. He remembered a different kind of silence. The one from his past, his ex-wife's silence after he missed another anniversary. His daughter's silence when he forgot her graduation. All the things he thought time had forgiven. Now it echoed again, in this Cuban church, where he was a stranger asking for mercy without deserving it. The next morning, a knock finally came. It was the old woman from the corner, the one who sold bracelets and never spoke. She handed him a note. She asked me to give you this. It was from Juliana. If you want to find us, come to the place we first watched the sunset. Alone. He didn't hesitate. The journey took 3 hours. A rented car. A broken road. A trail through sugarcane fields. At the top of the cliff near the broken lighthouse, they stood Juliana and Rozio. No luggage, just them. Rozio looked thinner, pale, but strong. I lied, she said. It's not yours. Richard exhaled for the first time in days. But the way you reacted, she continued, told us everything. You believed it could be. That's how deeply you reached into us. Juliana spoke next. We needed to know what kind of man you really were. And now you do? Yes, she said. And now we decide. Richard waited. Rozio stepped forward. I'm staying here. With friends. I need quiet. Juliana looked at him. I'm coming back. But not for you. For me. He asked what that meant. It means we'll see each other. But this time, we don't pretend this is a fairy tale. We already tried that. He nodded. The wind blew softly between them. And for the first time, Richard didn't feel like a visitor anymore. He felt like part of the island's story. Months passed, slowly like honey in the sun. Richard didn't chase Juliana. He let her come when she wished. Some mornings she brought guava jam. Other times she said nothing and just sat on the edge of his porch, legs dangling, eyes on the sea. He started painting. Nothing grand. Just colours on scrapwood sunsets, women's eyes, empty chairs. The townspeople watched him quietly. Some softened, some didn't. He didn't expect forgiveness, only space. Camilla never came back. Rozio wrote once, a postcard. I'm safe, I'm healing. The baby is beautiful. There was no return address. One day, Richard woke up to find Juliana asleep on his chair, her head resting on a book, her feet tucked beneath her. She had a wrinkle near her eye he hadn't noticed before. And for the first time, he didn't see her as a dream. He saw her as real. She stirred, smiled. You're staring, she said. I'm lucky, he replied. She stood, walked to him, placed her palm on his chest. This, she said, is still beating. That's all that matters. They didn't marry. They didn't move. They simply stayed, two people choosing to share space day by day with no promises. Just a long, slow truth building between them. Tourists came and went. The town changed. New music, new faces, but Richard remained. The man who once ran from failure had become a man who sat with consequence. Sometimes people asked why he stayed. He would say, because I was broken here, and I was rebuilt here, piece by three sisters who taught me how to listen. In time, the guest house reopened. Children laughed in the streets, and every sunset felt like a small apology from the past. One evening, Juliana took his hand as they watched the sky bleed into orange. I don't forgive you for everything, she said. I don't expect you to, but I love the man you became. And Richard, eyes fixed on the sea, whispered, so do I. And for the first time in years, he meant it. Later that year, a documentary filmmaker came through town. Young, eager, with too many questions and not enough patience. He'd heard stories of El Americano and the Three Sisters, of scandal, of romance, of betrayal and redemption. He asked Richard for an interview. No, Richard said. Some stories aren't meant for cameras. The filmmaker asked Juliana instead. She laughed and said, we're not characters. We're consequences. Richard watched as the young man left, disappointed. He thought about how tempting it was to turn life into legend, but how much harder it was to simply live it. One afternoon, while cleaning the old shed behind the cottage, he found the papaya bag from his first day on the island. The plastic was brittle, almost transparent, but he kept it. A reminder that small moments can change everything. Juliana started teaching local girls how to read. She used old Spanish novels and scraps of poetry. Richard built them benches, painted the walls, watched them grow. He rarely spoke of his past anymore. Not because it hurt, but because it no longer defined him. Sometimes, late at night, he would find Juliana staring at the stars. What are you thinking? He'd ask. That we're lucky, she'd whisper. Why? Because we found the ending we didn't deserve. And Richard would smile, take her hand, and whisper back, that's the best kind. Some stories linger longer than others. This one, I think, will stay with me for a while. Thank you for listening to this journey of love, loss, and quiet redemption. If it moved you, please like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories that reach into the heart.